West Yorkshire, a land shaped by centuries of industry and tradition. Ancient stone villages nestled between the Pennine Hills, former mining communities where generations of families have lived and worked. But in the market town of Pontefract, on a quiet council estate, stands a house that defies everything we understand about the natural world. This is 30 East Drive, a perfectly ordinary council house on a perfectly ordinary street. But for nearly 30 years, this modest home was the epicenter of Britain's most violent and terrifying poltergeist haunting. The entity that tormented the Pritchard family became known as the Black Monk of Pontefract, and what it did to this family defied every natural law. In August 1966, the Pritchard family had been living peacefully at 30 East Drive for 2 years. Joe worked as a miner, Jean was a housewife, and their teenage children, Philip and Diane, were typical Yorkshire teenagers. Then, on August 30th, 1966, everything changed. Jean and Philip were alone in the house when they heard water dripping from the kitchen ceiling. But the house above was empty, and there were no burst pipes. As they mopped up the mysterious water, white powder began falling from the air like snow. It covered everything, furniture, carpets, even their hair. But when they tried to collect it for analysis, it vanished. The Black Monk had announced its arrival. Within days, the phenomena exploded into violence. Heavy furniture slid across rooms by itself. The family piano moved several feet while Jean was playing it. Objects flew through the air with deadly accuracy. The West Yorkshire police were called repeatedly. Officers witnessed chests of drawers moving on their own, pictures falling off walls, and lights switching on and off. Several policemen filed official reports confirming the supernatural activity. But the entity seemed particularly focused on the family's teenage daughter, Diane. It would drag her upstairs by her hair, leaving her suspended in midair. Witnesses saw her thrown from bed to bed while she screamed in terror. The attacks grew more personal. Diane would wake up with mysterious bruises and scratches covering her body. The entity began leaving messages scrawled on mirrors and walls, crude threats written in what appeared to be medieval script. Then came the most disturbing manifestation of all. Family members and visitors began seeing a tall figure in black robes throughout the house. The entity had the appearance of a medieval monk. Research revealed that 30 East Drive was built directly on land once owned by Pontefract Priory. In 1539, during Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries, the prior and several monks were executed for treason on the exact spot where the Pritchard house now stands. Local records identified the most likely candidate, a Cluniac monk who had been executed for murder in 1540. His body was left to rot as a warning to others. But the Black Monk's most terrifying ability was yet to be discovered. In 1968, during a family gathering, the entity materialized in front of a dozen witnesses. It spoke in a voice like grinding stone, claiming the house and everyone in it belonged to him. Then it demonstrated its power. Before the horrified witnesses, the Black Monk lifted 15-year-old Diane 3 feet off the ground and held her suspended in midair for nearly a minute. By 1970, the Pontefract poltergeist had attracted national media attention. Reporters, photographers, and paranormal investigators descended on East Drive. Many left as believers. Colin Wilson, Britain's leading authority on the paranormal, spent several nights in the house. He witnessed books flying off shelves, doors slamming with tremendous force, and temperature drops of 20 degrees in seconds. But the most disturbing incident occurred in 1972. The entity physically attacked Joe Pritchard, throwing him down the stairs and breaking his ribs. As he lay injured at the bottom, witnesses heard the black monk's voice laughing from the empty rooms above. The Pritchards endured 30 years of supernatural terror. The activity only ceased when Jean Pritchard died in 1996. The black monk, it seemed, had been waiting for her. Today, 30 East Drive operates as a paranormal investigation center. Hundreds of ghost hunters have stayed overnight, and many report continued activity, cold spots, moving objects, and glimpses of the black monk. Philip Pritchard, now in his 70s, still refuses to enter the house. When asked about his childhood there, he simply says, "Some things are better left buried." The Black Monk of Pontefract may have been a medieval murderer seeking revenge, or simply an entity drawn to the fear and chaos it could create. But one thing remains certain. At 30 East Drive, evil found its home and refused to leave. From the suburban streets of Pontefract, we now travel to the banks of the River Thames, where one of England's most opulent mansions conceals a dark and disturbing secret. Welcome to Ham House, a 17th century palace where power, cruelty, and death have left behind an army of tormented spirits. What lurks within these gilded halls has made this National Trust property one of the most haunted houses in the UK, home to no fewer than 16 different ghosts. Built in 1610, Ham House was designed to showcase wealth on an almost unimaginable scale. But behind the gilded facades and priceless tapestries, this was a house where cruelty was commonplace and human life was expendable. The most notorious resident was Elizabeth Murray, Duchess of Lauderdale, who inherited Ham House from her father in 1655. Described by contemporary accounts as ruthless and manipulative, the Duchess ruled her household with an iron fist, treating servants not as human beings, but as disposable property. Her cruelty knew no bounds. Servants were beaten, starved, and worked to death within these very walls. What makes Ham House particularly disturbing is the systematic nature of the suffering that occurred here. This wasn't random violence or isolated incidents. It was a carefully maintained atmosphere of terror where the powerful preyed upon the powerless for centuries. The very architecture of the house seems designed to facilitate secrets, with hidden passages, concealed staircases, and rooms where screams would never be heard. Today, visitors to Ham House report experiences that transport them back to the darkest days of aristocratic cruelty. The most frequently reported phenomenon is the sound of screaming, blood-curdling cries of agony that echo through the grand rooms and servants' quarters alike. These aren't faint whispers or distant murmurs. Witnesses describe ear-splitting shrieks that seem to come from the very walls themselves, often accompanied by the sound of running footsteps and desperate sobbing. The screams are so realistic that security guards regularly search the building, convinced that someone is in genuine distress, only to find the house completely empty. But it's not just sound that haunts the house. Visitors report the overwhelming sensation of being watched, followed, and judged by invisible presences. Many describe feeling a hand on their shoulder, only to turn and find no one there. Others report being pushed or shoved by unseen forces, particularly on the main staircase where several servants are believed to have met violent ends. The psychological atmosphere is perhaps the most disturbing aspect. Guests frequently report sudden mood changes, overwhelming feelings of despair, terror, or hopelessness that wash over them without warning, as if they're experiencing the final emotions of those who died within these walls. The most active spirit at Ham House is the Duchess herself, Elizabeth Murray, who died of disease in one of the wings in 1698. But her death brought no peace to Ham House. If anything, it seems to have intensified the supernatural activity, as if her malevolent spirit continues to terrorize the building from beyond the grave. Staff and visitors regularly report sightings of an elegantly dressed woman moving through the house with an air of absolute authority. She's been seen in the Great Hall, the Duchess's bedchamber, and particularly in areas where servants would have worked. Witnesses describe her expression as one of pure disdain, as if she's still judging everyone around her and finding them wanting. But the Duchess isn't alone in death. Ham House is haunted by her victims, the countless servants who suffered and died under her rule. These spirits seem trapped in endless cycles of servitude, still trying to complete tasks assigned to them centuries ago. Kitchen staff report seeing figures in period dress, frantically working in empty rooms, their faces etched with terror and exhaustion. Most heartbreaking are the reports of child spirits, young servants who died far from their families, now forever wandering the halls, looking for comfort that will never come. Even the Duchess's pet dog has been seen and heard, its ghostly barking often preceding the most intense supernatural encounters. What makes Ham House particularly credible as a haunted location is the sheer number of witnesses. As a National Trust property open to thousands of visitors each year, the supernatural encounters are constant and well documented. Staff members, many of whom are skeptical by nature, have become believers after working in the house for just a few weeks. In other reports, security systems regularly malfunction in specific areas of the house, with cameras capturing unexplained shadows and movement in locked rooms. Temperature sensors record dramatic drops that follow no natural pattern, often concentrated in areas where the worst historical abuses occurred. The National Trust has embraced the house's reputation, running official ghost tours that regularly produce genuine supernatural encounters. Tour guides report that certain rooms seem to perform for visitors, with supernatural activity intensifying when large groups are present, as if the spirits are desperate to tell their stories to anyone who will listen. Professional paranormal investigators who've studied Ham House describe it as uniquely active. Unlike locations where activity is sporadic or seasonal, Ham House seems to exist in a state of constant supernatural turmoil, with multiple entities manifesting simultaneously across different areas of the building. Ham House stands today as one of England's finest examples of 17th century architecture, its rooms filled with priceless artifacts and stunning period details. But beneath this veneer of cultured elegance lies something far more disturbing. A house where centuries of cruelty and suffering have created a supernatural ecosystem that shows no signs of fading. From the grand shadowed halls of Ham House in London, we now travel north to the quiet countryside of Goosnargh, Lancashire. Here stands Chingle Hall, a 13th century manor drenched in centuries of history, tragedy, and reports of the supernatural. Known as one of Britain's most haunted houses, its walls have witnessed religious persecution, confinement, and untimely death. Now we uncover the chilling stories that have made Chingle Hall a magnet for ghost hunters and thrill seekers alike. Built in 1260 by Sir Adam Singleton, this medieval manor was never meant to be just a home. From its very foundations, Chingle Hall was designed with concealment in mind. Hidden passages, secret chambers, and priest holes that would later become the stage for some of history's most disturbing events. The Singleton family controlled this fortress of shadows for over 3 centuries, but it was Eleanor de Singleton whose tragic fate would forever stain these walls with supernatural dread. Eleanor was the last of the Singleton bloodline, a young woman whose inheritance made her a target, but instead of protection, her own family became her captors. Deemed mad by her greedy uncles who coveted her fortune, Eleanor was imprisoned within her own home, locked away in a chamber that became her tomb. For years, she endured unthinkable abuse, her screams echoing through corridors that had already witnessed centuries of Catholic persecution. When she finally died at just 20 years old, broken and alone, something fundamental shifted in Chingle Hall. The house itself seemed to absorb her anguish, her fury, her desperate need for justice. But Eleanor wasn't the only soul to meet a horrific end here. When the property passed to the Wall family, it became a sanctuary for persecuted Catholic priests. John Wall, born in these very halls in 1620, would return as a Franciscan friar to conduct secret masses in the hidden chapel. In 1678, he was betrayed, captured, and faced a choice that would damn this place forever: renounce his faith, or face the most brutal execution imaginable. Wall chose martyrdom. He was drawn and quartered, his limbs torn from his living body, his head severed and displayed as a warning. Legend claims his severed head was eventually returned to Chingle Hall, buried somewhere within its grounds. In the modern day, Chingle Hall is known for being perhaps one of the most paranormally active houses in the UK. Spectral monks in both brown and black robes have been witnessed countless times, their ethereal forms gliding through halls where they once hid from persecution. But it's Eleanor's presence that dominates the paranormal landscape of Chingle Hall. Witnesses describe seeing her face, pale, anguished, desperate, appearing in windows when the house should be empty. Her voice, pleading and broken, echoes through rooms where she suffered her final torments. Some visitors report being physically touched by invisible hands, feeling the desperate grasp of someone trying to communicate across the veil of death. But perhaps most terrifying of all is the poltergeist activity that seems to grip the very structure of the house. In the kitchen, pots and pans slide across counters of their own accord, while lights flicker in patterns that defy electrical explanation, and pictures swing violently on their hooks as if touched by invisible hands. The chapel itself has become a focal point for supernatural fire phenomena. Wooden beams and hidden logs spontaneously burst into flames, burning intensely hot before mysteriously extinguishing themselves, leaving behind minimal damage but maximum terror. These fires appear without any natural cause, as if the very walls are trying to purge themselves of centuries of hidden anguish. One of the most disturbing reports of all is the recurring apparition of a giant skull that appears in the upper windows. A grotesque visage that stares down at visitors with hollow, accusing eyes. Some believe this is the martyred John Wall, forever watching over the place of his birth and burial. Others claim it's something far more sinister, a manifestation of the house's accumulated trauma. In 1985, a chilling incident occurred when witnesses observed a human hand moving bricks inside a wall, accompanied by thunderous banging that shook the entire structure. The priest's room has become notorious for unexplained smashing sounds that echo through the night, while mysterious figures with shoulder-length hair are glimpsed in the peripheral vision of terrified visitors. Chingle Hall stands as a testament to the darkest chapters of human history: religious persecution, family betrayal, and the kind of suffering that transcends death itself. It's not just haunted, It's possessed by the collective trauma of centuries. Now we move from Lancashire to the Norfolk countryside for our final destination. Here, Blickling Hall appears almost too perfect, its red brick facade gleaming, its elegant turrets reaching toward grey English skies. But beneath this Jacobean beauty lies something terrifying. This is the tale of a place so consumed by violence and betrayal that death itself refuses to stay buried here. Blickling Hall was built in the early part of the 17th century for Sir Henry Hobart, although the ghosts that reputedly haunt it are those of the occupants of a previous hall on the site. It once belonged to Sir Thomas Boleyn, father of the ill-fated Anne Boleyn. But the current hall's construction required something disturbing. It was literally built upon the bones of the previous house, the childhood home where Anne Boleyn learned to court power and paid for it with her life. The Boleyn family's rise was meteoric and brutal. Thomas Boleyn sold his own daughters into marriage arrangements for political gain, treating them as currency in a deadly game. When Anne caught Henry VIII's eye, Thomas didn't protect his daughter. He pushed her further into danger, knowing full well the king's history with wives who failed to produce male heirs. But the true horror began after Anne's execution. Henry VIII brought in a French executioner, an expert swordsman from Calais, who would make the death swift with a single blow. The current Blickling Hall was later built on the ruins of the original Boleyn family property. The Hobart family, who commissioned the new hall, made a chilling decision. Rather than clearing the old foundation completely, they incorporated parts of the original structure. Essentially, they built their dream home on what amounted to a graveyard of memories. What haunts Blickling Hall defies every ghost story convention you've ever heard. Anne Boleyn, executed on May 19, 1536, is said to appear each year on the anniversary of her death. She arrives by phantom carriage, driven by a headless horseman and pulled by 4 headless horses, all victims of the Tudor court's brutality. Visitors have reportedly seen the ghost of Anne Boleyn on many occasions. Exiting from the carriage, carrying her own head, she is reportedly seen to walk towards the hall, passing through any solid object she comes into contact with. But Anne isn't alone. Other members of the Boleyn family manifest in ways that suggest their deaths weren't natural. Thomas Boleyn himself appears as a shadow figure moving through the corridors, but witnesses report that his shadow moves independently of his form, sometimes reaching toward people while his figure remains stationary, as if some part of him is trying to grab what he can't have in death. Long before the Boleyns ever set foot in Blickling, this estate was home to another figure whose ghostly presence still lingers today. Sir John Fastolf, the 15th century knight who would later inspire Shakespeare's famous character Falstaff, once owned these lands, and according to numerous witnesses, he's never truly departed. Staff and visitors have reported seeing a figure in medieval armor wandering through the halls, particularly in the older sections of the building. Unlike the Boleyn ghosts, Sir John's spirit seems almost protective of the property, as if he's still standing guard over his former home. Some say you can hear the clanking of his armor echoing through the corridors late at night, a sound that shouldn't exist in a building that's supposed to be empty. What makes Blickling Hall truly unique among England's haunted houses isn't just the number of reported paranormal encounters, it's how these encounters span centuries, from medieval times right up to the present day. This isn't a case of old ghost stories being retold. It's an ongoing supernatural saga that continues to unfold. From poltergeists to sinister ghostly monks, From the ghost of Anne Boleyn to the Duchess of Lauderdale, these haunted houses hold stories that chill to the bone and linger long after you leave. From restless spirits to shadows that defy explanation, the UK's most haunted places are a reminder that some doors are best left unopened and some secrets are meant to stay hidden. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, why not like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments if you have visited any of these locations, and if so, what, if anything, did you experience? See you again soon.